So the police patrolling the surrounding of the church noticed that two people were behaving suspiciously. We understand that later on they discovered that two gunmen were on their motorbikes starting firing at the policemen around the church as they were trying to cross the security barrier to enter the church. The crossfire between the policemen and the assailants led to the death of one of the policemen along with one of the assailants and a number of civilians. We also understand that the other assailant tried to escape from a side street here, and then he later was arrested. We're not sure if it was by the locals here or and then later on handed into the policemen or by the policemen themselves. But we know that they found 150 bullets on him, along with an explosive device that he was planning to explode inside the church. We also understand that on their way here for this attack, they also attacked a shop owned by a Christian family, killing two Christian brothers. Now, the timing of this attack is actually very crucial, as it comes only 2 days before the New Year and also more than a week before the Coptic Christmas. We noticed that in the last few days the Egyptian authorities have intensified the security presence in the streets here as a precautionary measure for possible attacks on Christians or churches in general during the New Year and the Christmas period.
That's the BBC's Hanan Razik there. And according to the Egyptian Coptic Church, at least 120 Christians from their community have been murdered in Islamist attacks over the past 12 months. 43 Christians were killed in twin attacks on Coptic churches in Alexandria and the Nile Delta city of Tanta in April. At least 29 men, women and children were killed on a bus en route to a monastery in central Egypt in May after they refused to renounce their faith in Christ. And a Coptic Orthodox priest was stabbed to death in broad daylight in a street in Cairo in October. With me now is Archbishop Angaelos of the London Diocese of the Coptic Orthodox Church in Great Britain. Thank you very much for joining us. What is your reaction, firstly, to this latest attack on your community?
It's very sad, of course, the loss of any life, and especially when it's people who we know. And I know people from this community and have spoken to people over the phone during the course of today. It's a terrible time where people are supposed to be in prayer. Friday is a day of holiday in Egypt, and it's the day of greatest attendance of church services. It's like Sunday here in Britain. And so when people go to pray and then they end up being targeted and killed, and we also know that one of the security services at the door who was protecting them also lost his life. So for his family as well as theirs and their communities, it's a very sad and tragic day.
We just said before we introduced you the chronology of attacks. We didn't mention all of them, but the most harrowing of three in particular in April, in May and October on the community of Coptic Christians. I mean, what is your understanding of why you think they're being targeted in this way?
There's a greater radicalization on the fringe in Egypt, which demonizes and dismisses the presence of anyone who is different. It falls predominantly on Christians, because it is the biggest numeric minority. Christians represent 15% of the population. But it's also happened to the Sufi community in the last attack, where 235 people died. And so it is this ever-narrowing mold that, if one does not fit into, becomes dangerous for the whole community. And so it is a distancing of this fringe from the rest of society.
What can be a possible solution to those people from a community that perhaps live in fear that they're going to be targeted?
Well, as I've said on numerous occasions, fear is not a word I hear, but people are anxious and they realize that they are vulnerable. People who filled that church today know that churches have been attacked in the past and know that they are in a position of danger as we approach the New Year's Eve and, of course, our own Christmas, nativity celebrations. People will know that they are in danger, but what I've heard of is people who go into their front rooms with their families, pray together before they go to church because they think they may not return, or even worse, not all return. And so it creates a greater vulnerability, but there's also resilience there. And what we've seen from the Christian community is this constant gesture of forgiveness, of peace, And that is really the only way to break this cycle. It's the only way to appeal to the hearts of those who desire to persecute and say that this is human life, it's had its sanctity, and it needs to be respected.
Should that fail then, given the fact that these attacks are continuing on the community, what of the authorities, for example, in Egypt, do you understand there to be any level of protection that's given to Coptic Christians in the region?
Absolutely. I spoke out a couple of months ago when Father St Mina, the priest, was killed in Egypt, and I felt enough was done. But since then, we've seen such an increase. During these days, because we're approaching these feasts, there are thousands of troops on the streets. But as we're experiencing here in Britain, it doesn't stop people from perpetrating crime. And I think the visibility of the security services will, of course, be a deterrent. But if people are intent, then there needs to be a robust system of law and order that then calls people to account and stops further attacks.
We appreciate you joining us and for sharing with us your time. For now, thank you so much, Archbishop Angaelos. Thank you. Stay with us here on BBC World News, still to come. Liberia's Vice President Joseph Boakai concedes a presidential runoff election to the former footballer George Weah. We'll hear from our correspondent in Monrovia.
The most ambitious financial and political change ever attempted has got underway with the introduction of the euro.
Tomorrow in Holland we're going to use money we picked up in Belgium today, and then we'll be in France, and again it'll be the same money. It's just got to be the way to go.